Hare Krishna. Okay. So, yes, please lead if you're ready.
Okay. Radesh is not up for leading.
You can ask.
Radesha
Uh,
Prabhu.
I haven't heard you lead in many moons. Go
This is
for
a
it.
fact. Okay, I prefer to hear you lead, but if you prefer that I will lead, and then I shall act according to your desire.
Jai.
Okay. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Could you do the prayers, please? I got a little frog in my throat.
Sure. Jai Om Vishnupada Paramahamsa Paribrajikacharya Ashtotar Sata Shri Srimad A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shamakunda Radhakunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Navadvip Dham Ki Jai Ganga Mayi Ki Jai Jamuna Mayi Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Tulsi Devi Ki Jai Samaveta Bhaktavrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bol. Hare Krishna. So, Hare Krishna and welcome, whoever might be out there watching. It's Friday, July 5th, 2024 in New York, and you have arrived at the right place. It is Srimad Bhagavatam class with His Holiness Jayadvaita Swami and friends. Tonight, Maharaj is traveling. His travel schedule may or may not allow him to join the class, but he always likes that class goes on. So here we are. Hare Krishna.
This is a
Tonight,
cozy group tonight.
yes, and tonight, let's see, it looks to me like we're starting with Srimad Bhagavatam, third canto, chapter 33, and we're reading the description of the situation that Devahuti Mata was in after her son Kapiladev left home, and now we're hearing the description of her own domestic situation in which she was performing all kinds of austerities. Quite a nice situation, very heavenly. So I believe we're starting with text 18. That's what my notes say. Does that look right?
Sounds right to me.
All right. So would you like to read the first verse, or would you like me to? I could.
Go for it.
There's a couple verses before purport, but I'll read. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Text 18. Grihodyanam kusumitai ramyang bhava maradrumai. Sorry, ramyang bhava maradrumai. Ramyam bhavamaradumai kujad vihanga mitunang gayan matta madhuvratam. The compound of the main household was surrounded by beautiful gardens with sweet, fragrant flowers and many trees, which produced fresh fruit and were tall and beautiful. The attraction of such gardens was that singing birds would sit on the trees, and their chanting voices, as well as the humming sound of the bees, made the whole atmosphere as pleasing as possible. And remember, these are the descriptions of the celestial floating palace that Kardama Muni produced from his own yogic Shakti for his wife. And it's complete with everything, gardens, trees. Yatra pravishtam atmanam vibudhan nuchara jaguhu vapyam utpalagandhinyang kardameno palalitam. When Devahuti would enter that lovely garden to take her bath in the pond filled with lotus flowers, the associates of the denizens of heaven, the Gandharvas, would sing about Kardama's glorious household life. Her great husband, Kardama, gave her all protection at all times. Purport: the ideal husband and wife relationship is very nicely described in this statement. Kardama Muni gave Devahuti all sorts of comforts in his duty as a husband, but he was not at all attached to his wife. As soon as his son, Kapila Dev, was grown up, Kardama at once left all family connection. Similarly, Devahuti was the daughter of a great king, Swayambhuva Manu, and was qualified and beautiful, but she was completely dependent on the protection of her husband. According to Manu, women, the fair sex, should not have independence at any stage of life. In childhood, a woman must be under the protection of the parents. In youth, she must be under the protection of the husband, and in old age, she must be under the protection of the grown children. Devahuti demonstrated all these statements of the Manu Samhita in her life. As a child, she was dependent on her father. Later, she was dependent on her husband, in spite of her opulence, and she was later dependent on her son Kapila Deva. Om Jnana Timirantasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyeva Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita, Gadadhar, Shivasari, Gaur Bhaktivinda, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. This description is very different from what we see in our modern Western world. We're just reading in the Prabhupada's Lilamrita how there were various press conferences, such as he had in Chicago and Philadelphia, where female news reporters would be asking Prabhupada about the position of women in Vedic society, in the Krishna consciousness movement. And Prabhupada would say what he says here, what he's always said. He's not going to change the Shastras to suit contemporary public opinion. But it was a very hard point for the reporters to take, and it became quite a sensation. Prabhupada would chuckle later, knowing that he was being criticized for his statements, but like he would often say, what can I do? I am simply repeating. This whole paradigm that we hear of in the Vedic age of how the society is, first of all, divided according to people's natural inclinations, according to really as Maharaj would say, according to people's body clocks. Everything is set up so that if you part of this system, you're taken care of at every stage of life. You have work to do. You have your livelihood is provided, and everything is done in cooperation with and in consciousness of the overarching superintendence of the Supreme Lord. So this he says here, according to Manu, women, the fair sex, should not have independence at any stage of life. And this is very hard for some people to take, because this idea of being independent is attractive, especially because people don't want to be dependent on people who are unqualified. And that's certainly not what's being advocated here. Everyone should be qualified. But our qualification, really, when it comes down to it, is how much are we dependent on Krishna? How much are we conscious of Krishna? If we are dependent, if we are conscious of the ultimate superintendent, then perhaps we have a better chance of providing shelter to others. But Tulsi Priya has a hand up, and let's hear.
Oh, Hare Krishna. Obeisances to all the devotees. I'm very glad you said that about being dependent on Krishna, especially, in the wake of Independence Day. In this connection, I'm always remembering a very nice pastime that I'm very fond of about devotee named Manmohini Mataji. And what's her brother's name? Starts with S.
Swarup Prabhu.
Swarup Prabhu, yes. And she tells the story that, she was married. Her husband, I guess, wasn't one of the very qualified, or he chose to not be qualified after a while, and then he left the movement, and then he died. And she was wondering if she should remarry. She had a 2-year-old child. And so somehow the word got back to Prabhupada that she was wondering about this, and he called to have a meeting with her, and she and her brother went, and she said, she was afraid to even talk to him, but then somebody spoke for her and says, well, she's wondering if she should get married again. And Prabhupada is like, why do you want to get married? And she said, well, a woman is supposed to be protected. And he said, you're not protected? And he asked her brother, you're not protected? And he asked Caitanya-caritamrta, I think, Prabhu, who is in the room, you're not protected? He says, just see, they have no faith. So it seems that this idea of protection is really, of course, in the ordinary course of events, women should be protected. But ultimately, and Prabhupada said to her, he says, what is the guarantee that if you marry again, your husband will be your new husband will be any better? So it seems that, in the ordinary course of events, women should be protected, but ultimately we can't. It's like, I guess when you have maybe certain traditionalists think that, okay, if we just do everything a certain way, then everything will be nice in the world. If women are always under the control of their husbands, everything will be perfect. Or, if they're always under but it doesn't work like that in the material world. We can do those things, and we ought to do those things, but really, if we don't connect it to Krishna, then there's no guarantee that anybody will be protected or that anybody will be qualified. Because if you're trying to fix it on the material level, it's not going to work, because the material energy always acts as it does, and things tend to go awry. So I just love that pastime, and if anybody wants to read it, I can give a link to it, because it's really good.
Yeah, it'd be great if you posted that link, because it's great to be reminded of these things.
She also tells it on YouTube in the Srila Prabhupada Memories. She speaks it very nicely.
Yes, the link that I posted has the video. It has a transcript of the video. So everything's there. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
I have another thought on that, just kind of along the same lines that Tulsi Priya Devi was just saying. And I don't want to get too graphic, because then it starts being overly indulgent and perverse. But because it was July 4th last night, there were lots of people congregated on the beach, and I took Maruti out, and we were on the beach, and there was some conflict, and there's some racial tension sometimes in Hawaii. But basically, a group of local people went, and they began beating up a family of a white family right next to us. They were just a couple arms lengths away, and the father could do nothing. He was totally, what can he do, and so we're given these responsibilities that the father should protect the daughter, the wife, and yet the daughter was being, anyway, the whole family was completely beat up repeatedly, just until the police showed up, and it was quite intense. And I remember thinking, well, first of all, my feet are broken. Otherwise, I would have certainly involved myself. And maybe that's Krishna's blessing that I remained aloof, not to participate. But I was just thinking about that point that, Atma Sanyeshu, fallible soldiers, if we repose our hopes that our family members can protect us, ultimately you need to have that dependence on Krishna. And it's pretty sickening to see the lower modes come out in that way. And it's difficult to think that actually we can't protect our children. Actually, we can't protect the real way of protecting our family members is to be completely dependent on Krishna. And then you actually give protection because it's a higher form of protection. I just had that thought, but it's just, yeah, it's tough. The daughter should be under the protection of the father, under the protection of the brother or the children, the son, and yet, what protection is that without Krishna? There is no protection.
Thank you for that. Hare Krishna.
Can I make another comment?
Please do.
Oh, Prabhu reminded me of a saying that I think Prabhupada, I don't remember where this is said, but it's something like Krishna protects, or maybe, I don't know, maybe it was your Gurudev that said it, but Krishna protects the protects the pious by their intelligence. So we have to be very careful where we go and where we congregate and with whom we congregate, because things can go badly at any moment, and so many times, people get involved, people get entangled in things with no, for no good reason, because they just happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, and associating around the wrong people. So, and there's another saying that I've heard is nothing good happens after 10 p.m. So, best to stay home. If you're out that late, it's better not to go.
This was 7 p.m. just for
That's sad. That's really sad. Broad daylight. Oh my gosh. It was definitely Krishna's mercy that you had broken feet and you weren't tempted to get involved.
Happy to see Maharaj. It looks like he's walking through an airport or some such thing. Hare Krishna. Jai. Somehow I had anticipated that we would have a low live turnout tonight, and I had reached out to Panchatattva Prabhu also, who's having a kirtan tonight at his house, and I had suggested, well, we could have a field trip of kirtan if, in case the readership was so low as to make the class unfeasible. So I don't know how other devotees in the class may feel about that, but they're having kirtan right now. And I said, well, you could just turn the camera on and we could have an evening of kirtan in lieu of other varieties of Bhagavad Gita.
But he's not connected via Zoom, right?
No, but I suggested that he do so.
If I had more taste for kirtan, I would give 2 thumbs up, but I rather enjoy these readings.
Yeah.
Well then, would you like to read our next verses? Unless there's more to be said. I just find it amazing that, Prabhupada makes these points very clearly. He quotes Manu very confidently, and it speaks to our own level of faith or lack thereof, whether we are able to accept them or think, oh, we have a better idea.
All right, I'll read 20.
Yes.
Hitva tadipsitatamam apyakandalayošitam kinchit chakara vadanam putra vishleshanatura. Although her position was unique from all points of view, saintly Devahuti, in spite of all her possessions, which were envied even by the ladies of the heavenly planets, gave up all such comforts. She was only sorry that her great son was separated from her. Devahuti was not at all sorry at giving up her material comforts, but she was very much aggrieved at the separation of her son. It may be questioned here that if Devahuti was not at all sorry to give up the material comforts of life, then why was she sorry about losing her son? Why was she so attached to her son? The answer is explained in the next verse. He was not an ordinary son. Her son was the supreme personality of Godhead. One can give up material attachment, therefore, only when one has attachment for the supreme person. This is explained in Bhagavad Gita, Parang Drishva Nivartate. Only when one actually has some taste for spiritual existence can he be reluctant to follow the materialistic way of life. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale Gurudasa Jayadvaita Swami Namne. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalake Chakshurun Militam Jena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. I really enjoy this, especially that phrase, Ipsatatamam, this highest, strongest attachment, material attachment. And Dravida Prabhu calls the 8 verses in the 25th chapter of this canto, he calls it the Sadhu Sangashtaka. It either begins with Prasanga Majaram or Tatik Shiva Karunika. I'm not sure which one comes first. But this verse reminds me of Prasanga Majaram Pasham Atmana Kavayoviduhu. Sa eva sadhu shukrito mokshadvaram apavritam. That we have this someone who is actually learned, kavi. That person can understand that prasangam ajaram pasham, that these binds, these pasha, these ropes of material attachment to entanglement are so powerful, are the most binding to this material world. Ipsatataram, that this desire is so strong. The heavenly ladies of Indra's kingdom, they're envious. Devahuti's position is enviable. And yet, if you transfer that attachment, it's not that we give up attachment. And that's part of one of the pitfalls of the impersonalist philosophy, is that you've been burned so many times by contact with attachment, by material love and relationships, that you just want to wipe them out. Any thought of attachment becomes a trigger for fear. And I've experienced that also. I feel like sometimes I get worried about, I'm becoming attached to something. And then I think, but it's spiritual. That's okay. For example, whenever my Guru Maharaj comes and we're worshiping Krishna Balaram, in my heart, I feel like, I'm so attached to these deities. And then I get worried, that attachment is binding. And no, it's Krishna. and a huge wave of relief floods over that. Okay, there are attachments that are okay. And so we're seeing, and we're going to see in the next verse, that this attachment is okay. Sa eva sadhu shukrito. But when that is applied to the sadhu, to the devotee, then moksha dvaram apavritam. Then the door to liberation is open, and the devotee doesn't even care for it. So it's a transfer. Rasovarjam rasopyasya param darshvani vartate. When we have that higher taste, then the lower taste can be given up easily. Whereas trying to just negate it, trying to cut it off, is extremely difficult. And so we see that because she's so aggrieved at the separation of her son, because that's where her real attachment lies, then although these are ipsatataram, although they're the most desirable objects and position, she's not at all sorry to give it up. She's just worried about losing her son. You have your hand up, Tulsi Priya Devi?
Yes, I do. So I had a question in the box, but I'm going to ask another question first. What if the attachment is mixed? Suppose you're attached, to a son or to a husband or something like that, where, the attachment is partially material because you have a relationship with that person, and you're not a completely realized soul, but at the same time, that you wouldn't be attached if that person were not a devotee. Maybe with a son it's a different story. You're going to be attached no matter what. But I'm thinking, other like, let's say, marital relationships or friendships, or I'm not sure what else you could say, but there's a certain material element because of personality or affection, whatever. But at the same time, that there would be no relationship if it weren't for Krishna consciousness.
Would you like to address that, Akendra Prabhu?
I think you have the conch shell.
Yeah, I don't think there's a one size fits all. We're getting this advice, param drishva nivartate, the understanding that the higher taste eliminates the lower taste. And so
Mhm.
it may be gradual. Sometimes we expect it overnight, but I think my Guru Maharaj quoted last class, uh, nit, what is that? Nishchayat dhairyat, that
Mm,
patience and determination. So part of
mhm,
it is patience, and at least that attachment is reposed, if not completely, at least partially, for spiritual purposes.
mhm,
There's a difference, the
mhm,
attachment to family members who are not devotees, and therefore in Queen Kunti's prayers, I think it's stated in one of those purports that she didn't need to give up the attachment because her children were devotees.
mhm,
And yet at the same time, still she's submitting that, okay, let my attachment to Krishna be exclusive. She's praying in that way. So even if,
mhm.
if our attachment isn't as exclusive as Queen Kunti's or Devahuti's, still we can have this conception that gradually it will come. And be patient.
Thank you.
That's my thought. I know it's not satisfactory for someone who wants, the the instant relief from any
No,
sort
it's
of
fine. Well,
tension.
yeah, instant relief. Yeah. I was just thinking as after I asked that, there's a purification in all relationships, that are not 100% centered on Krishna consciousness. If there's a tinge of material attachment, you do wind up getting a lot of purification because your false ego is knocking against the other person's false ego, and gradually that has to go, and you just keep it on the level of devotional service, and it becomes better that way. But still, if you're not purified, you're going to get purified.
Yeah, there's a hint that I found in the commentary of Srila Vishwanath, which is short, but gives us a little different facet of the of what's meant by this verse. He focuses on this Kinshit Chakara Vadanam. She wore a sorry look on her face, is how Prabhupada translates it. And Srila Vishwanath says that she became silent, Kinshit Chakara Yadanam, in the presence of all these things, meaning household paraphernalia. He says, this means she was filled with grief at seeing these things. So she was feeling that intense separation from the Lord, from her husband, all of, both of whom very much connected her to Krishna. But because all these events, the relationships are playing themselves out in this atmosphere, which although in a very early portion of the creation of the universe, still the material world. So that kind of grief is to be expected. It's mixed. We don't have the intense and pure sorts of non-materially tinged relationships and situations that you find in Vaikuntha Lokas and Krishna Loka. Everything's mixed here, and so any attachment is going to have some element of grief, of pain, of separation, of something or other, just by dint of its being manifested here, where everything is just mixed up.
I wanted to know if I understood you correctly. So this idea of all the household paraphernalia, um, we're talking about Devahuti, and I was thinking in the mundane example, somebody raises a family and then the children grow up and leave, and they call that an empty nester, and they're filled with grief. And I imagine, I can't speak for Devahuti, but if you have a household in which you're raising your children and you're very attached, and they're gone, and you look at all these things and they're all reminders of what you had, you know, and what once was, and now that's over with, and you're alone. Um, I don't know, maybe that answers the question about I had in the box about how did she give up her material comforts, you know, because maybe she didn't leave her palace. That's where she was staying, correct?
Right.
But it's sort of like it's all meaningless now. She doesn't, it doesn't serve any real purpose anymore that her son is gone. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. I understand it that she was filled with grief at seeing these things, and she lived with that grief. It's not that she
Mm.
self-medicated or tried to forget or
Yeah.
watched a lot of TV. She lived with it and she went on with her devotional life. And that in itself, that choice amid those very opulent surroundings was even further purifying, as if she needed further purification.
Well, could we say that her grief over her son being gone is also her devotional service? Those feelings of grief? Yeah.
Feelings of separation from the Lord. Yeah, of course.
Sure.
Maharaj, are you able to comment in your traveling state there? Would you like to say anything on this?
Maybe a little loud here, traveling in the car, but I'm just listening. Let me just see if there's anything I wanted to say.
I can hear you fine. You're
Oh.
you're 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 pretty clear.
No, I don't have anything further to add. This one. Good points made.
Thank you, Maharaj. Good to see you.
See you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Welcome.
So, Tulsi Priya, what was your question in the chat dealt with to your satisfaction, or is there more?
Yeah, I was just not totally clear on how she was giving up her material comforts, but I think I am now.
Yeah, she wasn't, diving in and saying, "Woo, I got the place to myself." You know,
Some
totally
parents are
different.
like that, though. They're happy to see their kids go.
Yeah. Anyway, she's not your average parent.
I'm reminded again of Srila Vyasadeva Katharamajurhava calling out after his son Shukadev Goswami. He was also very sorry to see his son leave.
And there's
Good
the
point.
example of Nanda Maharaj standing on the roof of his house looking for Krishna. After he left for Mathura, he kept waiting for him to come back.
Well, can we move on to our next verse and see if perhaps we can? I was going to see if Dana would like to read if she's available and willing. That would be nice.
I popped on super late, so I'm completely lost as to where we're at. I apologize, Prabhu.
Oh, sure. We're in Canto 3, Chapter 33, and we just read text number 20.
So 3:33:21.
Yeah, that's the verse that we're on. If you're able to read, otherwise, well,
I'm just navigating there, almost there.
great.
Wait, I can't think and talk at the same time. Okay. 33:21. Great.
Yeah.
Sorry, I apologize. Okay, I'm here. Anam pravrachati patya apatya virahatra yanta tatvapi apunaste vatse gaurava vatsala. Translation. Devahuti's husband had already left home and accepted the renounced order of life, and then her only son, Kapila, left home. Although she knew all the truths of life and death, and although her heart was cleansed of all dirt, she was very aggrieved at the loss of her son, just as a cow is affected when her calf dies. Purport. A woman whose husband is away from home or has taken the renounced order of life should not be very sorry, because she still has the presence of her husband's representative, her son. It is said in the Vedic scriptures, Atmaiva Putro Jayate. The husband's body is represented by the son. Strictly speaking, a woman is never widowed if she has a grown son. Devahuti was not very much affected while Kapila Muni was there. But upon his departure she was very afflicted. She grieved not because of her worldly relationship with Kardamuni, but because of her sincere love for the personality of Godhead. The example given here is that Devahuti became just like a cow who has lost her calf. A cow bereaved of her calf cries day and night. Similarly, Devahuti was aggrieved, and she always cried and requested her friends and relatives, "Please bring my son home so that I may live, otherwise I shall die." This intense affection for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, although manifested as affection for one's son, is spiritually beneficial. Attachment for a material son obligates one to remain in material existence. But the same attachment, when transferred to the Supreme Lord, brings one elevation to the spiritual world in the association of the Lord. Every woman can qualify herself as much as Devahuti, and then can also have the Supreme Godhead as her son. If the Supreme Personality of Godhead can appear as the son of Devahuti, he can also appear as the son of any other woman, provided that woman is qualified. If one gets the Supreme Lord as a son, one can have the benefit of bringing up a nice son in this world, and at the same time get promotion to the spiritual world to become the face-to-face associate of the personality of God. Hare Krishna. Wow. I really needed, I always say this, I really needed to hear this today. I was actually, just before I got on the call, having a moment. I had a loss in my life recently, and it's been very tough, and I needed this reminder. And actually all day today, I just had this feeling of just like praying to Krishna, like I want to be closer to you. I want more of you in my life. And so I always hear, as a side note too, and it's interesting in here, somebody had brought up in another class this morning about being qualified. And I just wonder, this is a neophyte question, but what does that mean? Like, how does one become qualified? And it said it in here several times. The other thing that stood out too was the example of the cow, crying. And I remember the first time I saw that happens and how much a cow does really grieve, I was just in shock. Like, I was like, wow, like, never thought it would be so intense and so connected and so like there. And I love animals, so I always knew that they were like, had feelings and things like that, but to see it and then that intensity. And so that really brought a very good picture of how much grief and to really feel that same thing as like Devahuti. But yeah, I love how this verse really brings it right back around of like, can we have that same intense affection for Krishna, And I'm rambling. I'm sure there's much more insightful things all of you, much wise devotees have to say, but that's what I have so far. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much for that. Maharaj, would you care to comment? Is that possible?
I'm reminded that in a lecture someplace, Prabhupada said that if your father dies or your son dies, will you not cry? And Prabhupada said that yes, you will. But one who has spiritual knowledge, still he'll remember what is what. So that directed to Arjun, that you'll have to kill your grandfather or your brothers and so on. So yes, you'll be sad, or you'll be stricken with grief, but still, by Krishna consciousness, one sees things from a higher perspective. So even devotees, if they lose a family member, just by the way we're wired, we respond with grief. We respond with grief. What are the words there in the verse? Gata tattva api. even though knowing the truth, she was crying. So, of course, on a higher platform, she was crying for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But that happens also. Gyata Tattva, even knowing the truth, still one feels loss, one feels separation from a family member or friend. But still, that tattva is there. One knows that, all right, this is what it is, but one has a higher understanding. Is that all right?
Is that all right, Dana? Is there something
Yeah,
more? Yeah.
no, that was perfect. I needed that so much. Thank you so much, Maharaj. And my last question is the question about being qualified. What does that mean exactly? Can anyone help me with that? I'm sorry
Depends
if
on the
that's
context.
just a silly question.
No, it's not a silly question, but it's a question that needs more information. Qualified in what context? You're qualified to see the personality of Godhead face to face, qualified to um, take up the process of devotional service. There's all sorts of different qualifieds. So what qualified means may differ according to the context.
In the purport, Guru Maharaj, it says that the Supreme Personality of Godhead can become the son of any other woman, provided that woman is qualified.
Ah, okay. Qualified means that they have love for Krishna on an advanced spiritual platform. To get the Supreme Personality of Godhead as one's son is not ordinary business. So it's possible, but one has to become exceedingly qualified. Unfortunate.
Thank you for that very much. Thank you.
Tulsi Priya?
Oh, Hare Krishna. Dana's question reminded me of, how Mother Yashoda, and I forget the names of the previous incarnations, and they prayed to be the parents of Krishna, but they went through severe austerities and they really wanted it. And I guess I was just thinking, you have to have love for Krishna, but that means your love is directed, focused on Krishna, not that it's all over the place. You say you love Krishna, but you also love this, that, and the other thing in the material world, and that's the hard part. We have so many attachments, but we have to become unalloyed devotees, that we want only Krishna. And it seems like so much of our material attachments are actually our desires for Krishna, but we misdirect them towards matter when it's really what we want is Krishna, but we keep getting sidetracked.
That is a true fact. I'm looking at our next verse. It has quite a sizable purport from my view. It's we have some time. What do the devotees think? Should we pause here for kirtan, or would someone else like to read our next verse, text 22?
I'm happy to keep reading if others don't mind.
We certainly don't mind. We would, in fact, insist.
Tameva dhyayati devam apatyam kapilang harim babhuva chirato vatsa nispriha tadrishe grihe. O Vidura, thus always meditating upon her son, the Supreme Personality of Godhead Kapila-dev, she very soon became unattached to her nicely decorated home. That's already a nice point, that it's becoming more detached. It already said she was detached, but now by that meditation, more detached. Here is a practical example of how one can elevate oneself in spiritual advancement by Krishna consciousness. Kapila Dev is Krishna, and he appeared as the son of Devahuti. After Kapila Dev left home, Devahuti was absorbed in thought of him, and thus she was always Krishna conscious. Her constant situation in Krishna consciousness enabled her to be detached from hearth and home. Unless we are able to transfer our attachment to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, there is no possibility of becoming free from material attachment. That line almost verbatim was stated in the last purport, by the way. And it's nice to see this. All right, I'll continue. The Srimad Bhagavatam therefore confirms that it is not possible for one to become liberated by cultivation of empiric philosophical speculation. Simply knowing that one is not matter but spirit, soul, or Brahman does not purify one's intelligence. Even if the impersonalist reaches the highest platform of spiritual realization, he falls down again to material attachment because of not being situated in the transcendental loving service of the Supreme Lord. The devotees adopt the devotional process, hearing about the Supreme Lord's pastimes and glorifying his activities, and thereby always remembering his beautiful eternal form. By rendering service, becoming his friend or his servant, and offering him everything that one possesses, one is able to enter into the kingdom of God. As it is said in Bhagavad Gita, Tato mam tattvato jnatva. After discharging pure devotional service, one can understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead in fact, and thus one becomes eligible to enter into his association in one of the spiritual planets. And Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur gives a one-line purport. This describes the result of meditating on the Lord separation. And I was just thinking this meditation becomes intensified in separation. We see this in a few different pastimes. We see this with Narada Muni, that when the Lord left, then that drive became so much more intense. And we see this in the push and pull of many of Krishna's pastimes, where he's constantly conducting this emotional roller coaster, but that always brings deeper attachment to him. And today was the disappearance day of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and I was thinking about my time in Jagannath Puri. That was the first ashram I joined, actually on my Guru Maharaj's instruction. He didn't specifically say that ashram. He just said an ashram in India would be recommended. That's where I chose. And it's Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur's Bhajan Kutir. And so one of the first services I ever performed in the ashram was ironing Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur's clothes and Srila Prabhupada's clothes. And I was thinking about that today, the separation of the previous acharyas and the Jaya Nilo Premadana, that the devotees are feeling this separation very intensely. That, you know, what is the value of my life without having the association of other Vaishnavas? And that intensity of separation just deepens our meditation on the Supreme Lord, and thereby deepens our detachment from material nature. We feel so much gratitude to the Vaishnavas for uplifting us from material nature, and just by meditating on them, that detachment becomes increased. So those are a few thoughts on this verse, the power of meditating on the Supreme Lord.
Jai, Jai, Jai. Thank you so much. Maharaj, do you have any comments? It looks like you may be pulling into your destination there.
Yes, we're just pulling in. I don't think I have an extra. It's hard to be focused and single-minded to the point of being able to comment.
Yes. Anyway, thank you so much for your association.
Thank you.
So thank you, Radhesha Prabhu, and it's time for another kirtan. That's what it's time for. So if you can suggest someone to lead kirtan, that would be wonderful.
How about Venkatesh Prabhu?
Sorry, not ready this time.
Okay. All right.
Oh, Dana.
Oh, how about Dana?
Um, I apologize for any offenses for this, but here we go. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. God, thank you.
Jayam Vishnupad Paramamsa Parivrajakaacharya Stotra Shata Shishma Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jayam Vishnupad Paramamsa Parivrajakaacharya Stotra Shata Shishma Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Srila Bhakti Vinod Thakur Ki Jai. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhaktivinda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gokopinath Shamakund Radhakund Giri Govardhana ki jai, Vrindavan Dham ki jai, Mayapur Navadvip Dham ki jai, Bhakti Devi ki jai, Tulsi Maharani ki jai, Samaveda Gaur Bhaktavinda ki jai. All glories to some devotees, all glories to some devotees, all glories to some devotees. Nitai Gaur Premanandi.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dana, for leading Kirtan. Hare Krishna.
Thank you all. Hare Krishna.
Jai. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.
His Holiness Jayadvaita Swami ki jai.
Jai.
Samaveta Bhaktivinoda ki jai.
Jai.
Gaur Premanande.
Hari Hari Bol.
Oh,
May we ask where you've landed, Guru Maharaj?
Albany.
Albany.
Then tomorrow I'll go to Satsrup Maharaj's gathering in Stuyvesant Falls.
Jai.
Hare Krishna.
Hare
Hey.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Jai.